the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
Up for this, like this night game, and we know Kirby's history with night game. Everything about this screamed, go to a nice dinner with your wife. Go to the movies for the second half. Go do anything other than watch the last 30 minutes of this football game. And I was right, because not only did Georgia blow out Ole Miss, it wasn't even close. Like, this was significantly worse than what we saw the week prior against Missouri, Matt Green. And this was a shellacking all across the board. But as the Georgia expert on this very show, sir, how did Georgia blow out Ole Miss?
I think it's just because they could not stop this offense. Georgia ran for 300 yards, passed for 300 yards. Carson Beck is absolutely dealing. Like, Carson Beck, I'll say it right now, this is no disrespect to the legend that was number 13, Stetson Bennett. Carson Beck is better than Stetson Bennett. Like, he's he's a better thrower of the football. Like, Stetson Bennett's got some moxie, and he made plays with his legs. And Beck's an underrated athlete too. You saw multiple times in this game where he was able to run for first downs. Like, this, the way, just with how crisp Georgia's offense looks, especially in the big games this year, I would say this offense looks better than last year's offense with Mike Bobo compared to Todd Monken. Offense just looks like it's just firing on all cylinders right now. Like, Ole Miss, like you said, it's not the best defense they're going to play this season by any means, but just to see Georgia come out and score touchdowns on their first 4 drives of the game, could have been 5th. That they got the interception before the half and wasted a lot of time for whatever reason. And then Carson Beck, we threw the interception on an absolute dime, honestly. Like, that ball was thrown like in the exact spot, could have been down inside the 10, but went off Dominic Lovett's hands and got picked off. But I felt like, and then you got Bowers back. I think that surprised, for what you were hearing from reports, you were not surprised by the time kickoff came. I mean, they were hyping up that this guy was balling out in practice on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So he looked as good as ever. Like, he's breaking tackles, like his very first catch got like a little lateral, like, jump cut. And it's like, okay, that's a good test right there, right off the bat. So to get Bowers back in this lineup, it just, you could see the difference he makes. Like, the Florida game and the Missouri game, like, Georgia's offense still looked really good in both those games. More so probably the Florida game than the Missouri game. But you saw on that first touchdown to Ladd McConkey, like, Bowers runs a post and 2 defenders go with him, and it just opens up McConkey. And it's just, there's just so many playmakers with Rosemary Jack Saint, Ra Thomas, Dominic Lovett, McConkey. It's like, this passing offense is, as far as the contenders in the college football playoff right now, I think Georgia's got the best offense of any of the contenders.
Wow. I don't think that's off the mark here. I was thinking about it. I mean, maybe Florida State, Michigan, maybe. But I still trust Georgia over Michigan in that situation. Maybe Ohio State's figuring some stuff out based on what we saw this week. I think they have the most talent out wide to push Georgia. See, that's the thing. Keon Coleman, I think, would cause problems for Georgia, him and Walker and their size, and seeing what that would do. But they're causing problems for everybody. So just Marvin Harrison. We talk about Brock Bowers being just an absolute freak of nature, but I mean, Marvin Harrison also just an unguardable freak that, like, him and Ibuka and company, we've seen what they've done to Georgia through the passing game. The difference, though, and why I don't think they're as big of a threat as they were a year ago, is just the drop off from Kyle McCord to CJ Stroud, I think, is pretty large. And I just don't think you have that kind of talent who CJ Stroud is just dealing in the NFL right now. And I just think you saw in that Georgia game was just, he's a special quarterback. So I don't, and what we've seen in the past, to beat Kirby Smart, it requires a special quarterback performance. And I just don't think that's McCord.
And that's the thing. And like, this year, like, you could say Ohio State's defense, you could say Michigan's defense has been better than Georgia's, but like, if you get into a shootout, are you ever going to feel like anyone really truly has a better defense than Georgia? Like, yeah, they could statistically be slightly better, but Georgia's basically going to be as good defensively as anyone they're playing against. And you've seen, especially lately, this is the 4th straight game that Georgia's given up a touchdown on the opening drive of the game. And it's basically like Kirby and Schumann and Muschamp. They're like, okay, this is what they want to do. Bet we're going to figure out how to stop it. Like Ole Miss had, I think, 185 yards on their first 3 possessions of the game, scored 2 touchdowns. Their only 2 touchdowns of the game. I mean, that was basically half of their offense for the entire game that happened on those first 3 drives. And then from then on out, like they just weren't able to stop Georgia. And I think that's kind of what I saw. We both kind of predicted this game similarly, is that Ole Miss would score some points, but ultimately Georgia's offense wasn't going to get stopped. And I think way more so than I thought, putting up a 50 number. But yeah, I think this Carson Beck, Bowers, and this running game really coming along. Like, this is the best game of Kendall Milton's career, honestly. And so you've seen what this guy can do when he's healthy. Can he stay healthy for 14, 15 games, however many it takes for Georgia to make another national championship run? But if this running game can be as good as it was, this offense is basically unstoppable.
So what did you see out of Kendall and Brock Bowers specifically? What popped for you and for both of them in this game?
I felt like Milton Bowers was just looking like Brock Bowers, and then he just doing Brock Bowers things. He wasn't used like he normally is, but I mean, you saw that touchdown. I forget what kind of route. I think Ben Watson called it like a viper route, where he just comes and just breaks down the linebacker and just runs right around him. It's like, okay, this guy's operating on the level that he's supposed to be. But Kendall Milton, like, he was running hard, just breaking tackles, like had that burst, like a couple of like 30-yard runs in this game. So it was just nice to see. Like Dejon Edwards, I've always felt like no shade to Dejon Edwards, because he's the one been carrying the running game all season, but he's just a guy who feels like he's good and isn't necessarily that top end guy. Not that Kendall Milton is that top end guy, but when healthy, it feels like he's got a higher ceiling. So when you got 2 guys like that, that's just, you always want multiple healthy guys in the running game, because anything can happen at that position. But I think Georgia's offense is really is clicking as good as ever at this point in the season.
Interesting. And I wonder too, like, did Ole Miss go wrong when you're watching this game? You're like, oh, Ole Miss, what are you doing? Like, was there something where you're like, this is not how you want to attack Georgia? What did you see Ole Miss do that just did not work and led to them kind of getting beaten down by this Georgia team?
It's hard to say, because it feels like Georgia just makes adjustments, because Ole Miss was having success early. Like Jackson Dart was making a few plays. Like they hit the tight end on the wheel route, like got him wide open. Because that's one thing I was worried about when you look at Georgia with Jamon Dumas-Johnson, Butkus finalist out. Butkus finalist from a year ago out. It's like C.J. Allen and Raylan Wilson, two true freshmen, were really filling in that absence. And C.J. Allen went on to lead Georgia in tackles in this game, and I think he's the one that's really creating a lot of buzz. Like, and that's got to be the frustrating part when if you're a fan of another team watching Georgia play. It's like, okay, they're junior, senior, whatever year Dumas Johnson is, experienced inside linebacker gets hurt. They got to bring in a true freshman, and this guy balls out and leads them in tackles. So that's just the embarrassment of riches Georgia has on the defensive side of the ball. But I think Quinshon Junkins was able to run it a little bit, like 75 yards in this game, especially when you get in the red zone. Because I think that's the one area that you can definitely criticize Georgia's defense, is like it's almost an automatic touchdown when teams get inside 10 yards. And Judkins had 2 pretty easy runs that just, I think they had a 1st and goal from like the 5 where he ran it in and it was a penalty, and it was 1st and goal from the 15 and they just ran it on the next play. So I think that's one area where Georgia's been, a little questionable. But I mean, 45 carries for 179 yards on the ground for Ole Miss. Like, that's a good, rushing production on the ground. But at the same time, it's only 4 yards a carry. So if you want to do that and you're going to give up 50 points on the other end, like, Georgia will probably take that all day. But I mean, you got to look at, I guess Tennessee is going to try to attack Georgia a similar way on the ground. So, if it feels like every Georgia game, there is like a shot early where someone gets a guy running deep down the field, and more times than not, they don't hit it. So, if Joe Milton can hit one of those, like we remember Hendon Hooker a year ago, or in 2021 at least, getting that early on and missing that open deep ball. It's like Jackson Dart had one of these on one of Ole Miss's early drives. So, we'll see. The secondary's been pretty good against most of the teams they've played. So this is probably I would say probably the best secondary in the SEC, if not the best secondary in college football. So I think if you're going to get Georgia, it's probably, on the ground and then you got to open up the passing game that way.
Yeah, and I mean, the matchup's good, and I wonder, this kind of leads us into Tennessee, is I think, look, there's not a great way to play Georgia, but I do think there not being stakes makes the game better for Georgia, or for Tennessee. Like, Georgia already being clinched to get to Bama, they can lose the Tennessee game, and it not be a big deal, because they just beat Bama, they're in the playoff, and everything.
Well done, nephew. Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.